Hello, welcome to the Daily Bible Podcast. My name is William Hemsworth. Thank you so much for joining me for today's show. Well, today we start chapter 16. We're going to look at chapter 16, verse 1 today. Matthew chapter 16 has a lot of theological depth to it, so we're going to take these verses a little slowly. But again, we're going to start with verse 1. So today's verse, Matthew chapter 16, verse 1 says, "And the Pharisees and Sadducees came, and to test him, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven." So let's give some background on these two groups. So the Pharisees. The Pharisees and Sadducees had hardly anything in common. Their views were totally opposite of each other. So the Pharisees believed they had to follow God's law, the ritual laws, the traditions, and that was the way to God. And they believed in the resurrection of the dead. The Sadducees, and they also believed in the whole entire Old Testament as, being scripture. So Genesis through Malachi. The Sadducees were quite a peculiar group. They only believed that the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, they only believed that those books were scripture. And they didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. That's why they were sad, you see. Just kidding, that's a little lame joke. But in Jesus, they found a common enemy. They found a common enemy in Jesus. And so after everything that Jesus has done, after all the healings, all these healings that he's done with people, he's healed the 5,000. And just before this verse, he just got done feeding the 4,000. They still have the audacity to ask him for a sign from heaven to prove who he is. You see, these leaders interpreted signs from heaven to predict weather. But they were totally blind. They were totally blind to aspects in the spiritual realm. Totally blind. And so Jesus refuses to perform miracles for those who aren't convinced in who he is, who aren't convinced of his authority. Because his authority is already manifested in what he's done. His authority is already manifested in the feeding of the 5,000, in the feeding of the 4,000, in healing the Canaanite woman's daughter, etc., etc., etc. His authority has already been proven. And here they are. We want a sign that you are who you say you are. They had no intention of believing him. They were blind. They had the wool over their eyes. And unfortunately, I think it's the same with some people, maybe even ourselves at times. No matter what is said about Jesus, no matter that we don't have his bones, that there are those that say Jesus never even existed, even though there are records outside of the Bible, many records outside of the Bible that attest to it. It's just willful spiritual ignorance. Because the truth is out there. The truth is out there in Scripture. And even if they don't accept the authority of Scripture, they don't accept what Scripture says at the point, they could look into history to see the things that Jesus did. It's not hard to find. Many Jewish and Roman historians wrote about him. And the fact remains that Christianity is the easiest religion in the world to disprove. All someone has to do is show us the bones of Jesus. The problem is that nobody has been able to produce them. It's because they're not here. He ascended into heaven after resurrecting from the dead. And not only that, we have the testimony of the apostles, this ragtag group going throughout the world, dying for what they saw. Jesus being resurrected. People do not die for a lie. They changed the world. Christianity spread across the known world. It is now across the world today, and it's still growing, even though in some places it may not seem that way. That's probably the ultimate proof of who Jesus is. So thank you for joining me on this episode of the Daily Bible Podcast, and we'll catch you tomorrow. Have a fantastic day. God bless you.